And that worked out.
Kids back in the house. Happy County, following the rule.
But even like,
Hey. You got your independent.
sometimes downsides it feels like one of these issues.
Right.
Travel like.
Liberated, yeah.
Cause when I
Figured
got
out.
out, dad died, I got remarried. They were separated. She met my dad 20 years and my stepdad 20 years. So when he
Right, like-
like years ago, I said, Mom. I used to make sure.
Right, right.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
If I think
And-
that
and-
manipulation.
And what happened?
It's pretty here figured out.
Oh, but you
She
did.
did, she did.
She got it.
Yeah.
Take
Right.
it.
Senior year, so that there was.
And now. Some mobility challenge. Unfortunately, it was
Right, right.
very happy to be there when
Right.
no one. Except for the caves to.
Now?
Right, she got an elevator.
Yeah.
And you saw her from those.
Oh, okay.
Remember
Yeah.
that? That she get Harvard right outside her patio.
Hey, Sarah Gill.
Enjoy some.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Do you want me to crouch, buddy, or are you?
Yeah.
Excuse me, everybody. I am going to very briefly, at the request of Kristen, explain very briefly what this graphic is.
How many hours do you need?
Exactly. So the main introduction to this graphic is that it's mainly used to illustrate how complicated the transportation funding process is. You are probably, I was telling Sarah Keel earlier, there's probably like a dozen people in the state who can actually like explain this all the way through. And I am not one of those people, but it is useful to understand the general flow of money. The one that we're looking at now is the allocations one. The other slide that was being shown was the revenues. So the revenues one was stuff coming into the state and it's showing how we distributed it.
Sorry, gentlemen, may we, I can't, gentlemen.
Yeah, let's,
Sorry.
I give attention
I
to
couldn't-
Andrew here real quick.
hear what was
Yeah,
going on.
thank you. Okay, yeah.
So yeah, this is the allocation slide and the other one was the revenue slide. The allocation slide is basically showing once the state has all of the money, generally, where is it going? What programs is it getting out to? And I say generally by color, it's actually incredibly specific by percentage here. If you wanted to go to the original slideshow for this, which is the CTB meeting in March, you could get dollar amounts for all of these boxes. They're all public, they're all out there. So the orange boxes are, I think it's 51% from the base allocation, and that's all maintenance and operating. And a big point that the CTB was making in March is that that orange has to grow the more that we construct. So all the additional lane miles that we build, maintenance and operating fund grows over time, and that orange box never gets smaller. It only gets bigger. So they were talking about balancing new construction with operations and maintenance. And then the yellow is the distribution fund. It's how it's divvied up. And you can see it's by mode. So it's by like transit, rail, ports, airports, space, and then all the way down through construction programs, which is 53%. That gets added in with the federal funding, which is the green boxes, and it has a whole bunch of sources in the green boxes of where that federal funding comes from. And then that gets pushed out to the construction program. So the construction programs are the like ones that people hear about a lot more. It's the state of good repair program, which is like reconstructing bridges and highways that need to be replaced. High priority projects, district construction grant, which are distributed by the smart scale process, which everybody also hears a lot about. This previous CTB meeting this week talked a lot about the IOEP, the Interstate Operations and Enhancement Program, which is like dedicated interstate funds. And then the Safety Improvement Program, HSIP, which focuses, as in the name, a lot on safety stuff, like improving curve radii, the like guardrail, all sorts of different like safety improvements that could be on highways. So that's the general flow. I think the biggest takeaway that's being talked about right now at the state level is interstate and maintenance and operations, about how you can only build so much before your maintenance, keeping that stuff up to snuff, starts to overtake your construction budget. So something to always keep in mind is everything you build, you then have to maintain basically forever. So yeah, I'm happy to answer questions. Like I said, I can't get into like exact specifics for a lot of these things, but there's a couple that I could answer questions about, or I could direct you to resources where you could learn more if you wanted to. But
And I don't see this explicitly, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I always remember that 2% of the budget was set aside for maintenance. Is that accurate? Everybody on staff know that off the top of your head?
2%,
Yeah, I remember that figure. 2% was set aside,
that would be really low.
like 51.
It's 51%. Yeah.
But 51% of the entire pot.
Of the transportation money.
Okay.
51%, but before it hits this, so the big orange and the big yellow is 51 orange, 49 yellow
Mhm.
at the top of this flow chart. And then the HMOF deficit that's underneath the yellow is the construction funds have to be used to make up any difference in maintenance shortfalls as well. So maintenance is the priority, keeping everything up to standards. I don't know what the 2% would be for.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No,
I don't have the number.
But I think the good point you made, the key point you made is that the maintenance and operations is the priority because of the Code of Virginia. The legislature said maintenance and operations first and foremost. If you have some money left over, go do new stuff. So it's maintaining that. And that's really unique compared to other states that they've kind of set up this way. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind.
Have you looked into the federal funding bill that just dropped? I think early this week or late last week.
Not the one that was just passed, no. I would be more waiting to see how that like trickles down into the state level and then I'd look into that. I'd love to hear about it.
It's just, I know the federal government unveiled their House Transportation Infrastructure Committee at the federal level. Again, I usually do state stuff, not federal, but just looked at it very quickly. Biden's 2021 bill is like 1.2 trillion, and this one that just got unveiled was like 550 billion. So it's a lot less money. It's a lot less grant program, a lot less formula funding. But it's still a federal infrastructure bill that should set the tone for transportation policy nationwide for the next 5 years. Still haven't looked into the specifics of it, but that's what we know so far.
Jay, question on that too. Chairman Graves announced that he's not going to run for re-election. Are you all expecting to see movement of the highway bill before he leaves office, or any thoughts on that?
I would hope something passes. The previous transportation reauthorization bill runs out either this November or September or something like that. So if we don't get a bill passed, we don't get federal money, which is billions. So,
I've heard some rumors that it's not the best of bills compared to what we have right now. Any thoughts or?
we always love to see more transportation funding.
AMRO, we can send it out. I think they just released a summary of the T&I committee yesterday, I think, and it's a really nice, easy kind of brief. They are not predicting that it's going to pass before the midterms. So there's been a lot of movement on some aspects that are things that AMPO is really happy about, particularly as it relates to the opportunity for MPOs to directly grant with the federal government as opposed to pass through from the states. There's some really nice movement about the expansion of the planning dollars to move beyond 30% design to get more projects shovel ready. So there's some things like that, but the reality is that federal dollars aren't going to be there to fund things, and the priorities that have existed previously in previous reauthorizations around multimodal transportation are not in this proposed legislation. So it's a difficult spot to be in with the expiring bill and the reality that it's probably not great for the agenda that we have in this region. but we could send out, they do a really nice weekly briefing on things. A lot of times it's hard to really get heads and tails in my opinion, but I thought that this particular week's update of that committee action was the most helpful that I've seen. Chet and I were talking about that earlier in the week. I don't know, Chet, if you got the chance to read it, but it seemed clearer than it normally is.
One quick follow-up on that too, because I don't follow it that closely. With Graves out of there, any predictions on who the next transportation chairman's going to be or leading candidates? Okay. All right.
I think they said something about it in a previous newsletter, but it didn't look concrete enough, but I can look back through it.
Who the holds the majority.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, I
think they
there
changed.
should be two obvious candidates, assuming, but
Yeah. Martha, what we're gonna do is I just have Sarah Keel, she can get that document from you and then send it out to everybody. Just as a good reader on that. I will add, while the probability of it passing is probably correct. I think 4 years ago, when they were doing reauthorization, the probability was not great. This was gonna get forward, and then all of a sudden was like June, July, August, September, done. So never know what happens in Congress.
When after reauthorizations, transportation is always the one that they prioritize. There's been many others that just operate without reauthorization.
Yeah. So, thank you very much for that. Andrew, really appreciate you bringing that forward and providing a high level on that. And maybe there will be another dissertation on that at some point that we can work on.
If anybody wants like a detailed explanation of everything on the graphic, again, the CTB presentation from March has, it's a full like 30-40 minute explanation of every single box on the graphic. So that would be the place to go.
Yep. It's good. All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. Welcome. The first item on the agenda is welcome introductions. We are going to do roll call, but let's just go around the room and just kind of say who you are and who you're with. You know, which tee it up.
Ken Lance, Plan RBA.
Martha Schickel, Plan RBA.
James Hudson, Virginia Association of Counties, also represent Richmond.
Amos Goudreau, Chamber RBA.
Andrew Bunn, representing Richmond.
Right, maybe Rico.
Ernest Moore, Richmond Department of Transportation.
Chad Sanders, RV Rapid Transit.
Sarah Wiziger, League of Women Voters.
John Root, Michael Testerman, Virginians for High Speed Rail.
Champ Burnley, Richmond Area Bicycle Association.
Upton Martin, Center of the Universe.
Joe Dismore, New Kent County.
Sarah Gilcrease, Plan RBA.
And I'm Gordon Dixon with Henrico County. Sid, I'll let you go next.
Sid, Plan RBA.
Sorry, you're muffled.
Plan RBA, eating lunch. Carrie, Plan RBA.
Chet Parsons, CBTA.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
You have Kristen online.
I'm online. Thank you very much, Sid, I appreciate that. Now, I cannot see any of that. I apologize. I don't want to call people out. I know Kristen
And Robert.
I know you're on a train.
Kristen Hott. I'm in the station. I'm at Penn Station, this beautiful transit station. Kristen Hott, Plan RBA.
Thanks. Who else we have online? I apologize. I just can't. My bifocals are out. Sid, go ahead and read it out. if you don't mind.
Mrs. Bash.
Bob Basham.
Okay.
Yeah, Bob Basham, Goochland.
And that's Gary's.
Got it. Okay, very good. Appreciate that. Thank you so much for that. Next item on the agenda is considering, roll call. We good?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
We have quorum.
Okay, good enough. Next item is consideration of amendments to the agenda. Anyone have amendments to the agenda that's been presented? Hearing none, we'll move on to administrative items. First one is approval of the March 19, 2026 CTA meeting minutes. I have a motion for approve. You should have gotten those in advance. So email. Second. Mr. Center of the atmosphere of the universe. And then Ernest is second that. All in favor? Awesome. Thank you very much. Next item is open public comment period. Anyone have any open public comments?
We did not receive it.
Didn't receive any? All right, we're rolling on today. Good stuff. We'll keep rolling on things. Next item is B1. Under presentations and committee discussion is the fiscal year 27 Unified Planning Work Program. Martha Schickel. Martha?
Thank you. Appreciate that. kind of want to do a little check-in. Do folks prefer that I pull some things up on the screen so that you can refer if you want to look at it from where you're sitting? I'm assuming we don't have copies, right?
I would say put them on the screen.
Let me just preface everything by saying that the Unified Planning Work Program is the annual kind of game plan for the MPO for the upcoming fiscal year, along with the allocation of the planning. So we get what we call PL money from the Federal Highway Administration, and we get 5303 funding from the FTA. And so it's the allocation of those dollars, the activities that the MPO at large is going to undertake for the coming fiscal year. The policy board took action to approve the Unified Planning Work Program at the April 23rd, I believe it was, policy board meeting. So we are ready to go. Each year, the UPWP has to be submitted to our state and federal partners by May 1st. And so we were able to achieve that deadline. Typically in a year where we receive our triennial recertification, which you all remember happened this past February, we will incorporate any feedback that we've gotten from that certification review in the Unified Planning Work Program, which we endeavored to do this year. We have not gotten the report from Federal Highway and FTA yet. We're still waiting for that to arrive, but we did use the verbal feedback, I'll call it, to inform the way that we've developed the UPWP. I can't talk and do this, so I'm so sorry. Take a pause for a second so I can get it up on the screen. Okay, so this is our UPWP for the upcoming fiscal year. We reformatted it a couple of years ago so that it was hopefully a little bit more of a user-friendly version for members of the public to understand what the role and responsibility of the MPO is over the course of the planning year. We started with the introduction of our major achievements from the prior year. So of course, since we wrote this at the end of March and submitted it through the CTAC and to the policy board, it really only represents the first 3 quarters of the fiscal year. And so we have some of our achievements that are noted in there were kind of scheduled to be completed kind of thing in the last quarter. Then we get into kind of the meat of the document, which is the planning priorities for the upcoming year, which I will review with you all. And we wanted to be able to highlight this at the top of the meeting today to really be able to set the tone for, as the CTAC moves into the next fiscal year, what of these work program kind of agenda items should we be thinking about the CTAC being involved in? So this is kind of the opportunity for CTAC to think about where we can best leverage your collective expertise to be able to inform the work program items and make sure that that flows according to the meeting schedule. We have deadlines for when we endeavor to accomplish the deliverables in the work program. In other words, when they ultimately go to the policy board in many cases for kind of final decision. And so we want to be thoughtful as we head into this fiscal year about how we tee up those activities to make sure they flow through our committee structure appropriately. We also talk about how our work program aligns with the federal planning requirements and factors. Just based on the conversation we had a moment ago about transportation reauthorization, we're a little bit of an unknown territory as far as what may come when that reauthorization happens. So certainly depending on the timing of that, there may be priorities that get imposed upon MPOs generally that we would incorporate in through an amendment. But for right now, we're operating with what we know. And then, the idea is that over the course of the year, we can monitor the priorities and the things that come up throughout the year, and we can always, there's a mechanism to amend the Unified Planning Work Program as necessary. So for 2027, as I mentioned, we are still awaiting that federal certification report. And so once we receive that, I think earlier this week, we were notified by FHWA and FTA. Of course, there was a transit conference this week, so there was a little bit of activity out of the office, but FTA is taking the lead on the recertification this year, and they've notified us that they expect to get the report to us within the next few weeks. So I would expect, I'm hopeful that by the time the policy board meets on July 2nd, we will have been able to receive and review that internally, and we'll be able to include that in the report or in the package of meeting materials. So depending on when the certification report comes in, we'll share it with you all so that we can get your, kind of awareness review on that. And certainly if there are any recommendations in the certification report that should be tasked to the CTAC, the policy board will undertake that. As you all probably recall, this past fiscal year was kind of a banner year. I may not have said this to you all before, maybe someone else on staff did, but FY 2026 was a significant year for us. Miles Bushing on our team did the math, and it is a 1 in 60 year occurrence for when recertification, long range transportation plan, and TIP all occur in the same year. So those are 3, 5, and 4 year cycles, the way I worded them, that happen. And so because they are on those staggered cycles, they don't normally happen at the same time, but this was our year of 1 in 60. So it was a tremendous year for us from a deliverable perspective. And so this is really an opportunity in this coming fiscal year. While the LRTP isn't completely finished, we achieved a pretty big milestone with the project selections approved by the board also at that April meeting. And we're driving toward completing the LRTP as it's in its final form document to bring to the policy board at their September meeting. So this upcoming year is kind of like a rebuild year for us. I mean, Andrew, I feel like it's sort of like what happens after you get like that breath after Smart Scale. Like, it's like, okay, how do we kind of reassess, reevaluate? So one of our big tasks this year is to really lean into that. We call it PQuad internally. It's the
Project prioritization.
Thank you. Project prioritization pilot program. That's why we say PQuad.
Makes sense.
We really want to lean into that grant funding source that we won last year to improve upon the development of our regional transportation demand model. This is where we're really going to be able to incorporate our scenario planning work that we've been talking about for years. It feels like really into that transportation model. So lots of exciting opportunities there. In addition to that, we'll be wrapping up at the end of June our merit funded grant that supports evaluation of alternatives to funding for continuing our transit access with GRTC and our other providers around the region. So we'll continue with the learnings that we have from that exploration this current fiscal year with our consultants and work with our providers to identify a more stable funding stream. Again, back to that reauthorization conversation. If we look at the proposed legislation as it currently stands, transit doesn't fare very well in that legislation. And so really thinking about what that's going to mean for our region and what are the other funding sources that we can identify to fill that hole if that were to occur. As you know, Fall Line is a project of great prestige and affection. And so we'll continue to work with our partners to advance that. Still have significant segments of the Fall Line that don't have funding yet identified to really finish the build out of that. And so we'll continue that. And as we can shift gears from the large scale multimodal long range transportation plan, we'll be able to go back into our modal plans to be able to really focus on Bike Ped RVA 2045, our park and ride study, our transit vision plan, and our short range project priorities. We are continuing to work closely with CBTA, recognizing we've got that every 2-year cycle of how CBTA dollars are allocated in the Smart Scale allocation process. So I'll mention on Smart Scale too, I know the commission is scheduled to vote on the regional project priorities for Smart Scale applications that go in this summer at the June meeting. And so we'll be moving through hopefully past pre-apps and into the fund selection process of that, and then kicking off the CBTA portion of that money, I think, next spring. And then finally, we continue to kind of do that regroup around public engagement and community outreach strategies. So we will continue to do the good work that we've always done with community engagement and outreach, but we won't have as many of those planning deliverables to get feedback and input on. It'll be more kind of that general awareness of who we are, what we do, and how we can engage with the public. So those are just kind of a couple of highlights from a focus area perspective. I'll say from kind of a little bit of a different lens from a priority perspective in FY 2027, as you can imagine, prioritizing safety really still remains one of the policy board's top priorities. We have a couple of grant applications that we've submitted to be able to fund the development of a regional safety plan and to be able to move forward with not only incorporating safety improvements into the project planning and prioritization process, but to do some community activation, I'll call it. It's not just community awareness and education. It's really around activation to cultivate a culture of safety across the region. What does that look like across our various communities, and how do we really get transportation safety to be a bigger part of the conversation, regardless of where you are in the region? And that lines right in with that multimodal future. So as our staff members sort of lean into our modal plans, biggest example of that is Dorian on our team, who you all know mostly because of his work in leading the long range transportation plan. He'll switch gears and move into his other hat that he wears, which is leading our freight and logistics modality efforts. And then Phil and will continue to work on the efforts with the active transportation, bike and ped, and our transit work. That's super, super high level. I really wanted to be able to just give you that grounding. And I know that Kristen's going to talk a little bit about community engagement update, but we were hoping to use this opportunity before we kind of segue there to know what things did you hear from me, or if you did have a chance before the meeting to review the UPWP, what things do you want to see on the agenda for the CTAC this upcoming year? And what planning activities would you like to plug into as a body?
Jim?
Hey, one thing I'd love to see, since we have Chet sitting in the background, I would love to have have him brief us on what they're doing and where there are opportunities to branch out a little bit and partner and what's on our current work agenda and where we can get creative in the future. Chet.
Happy to do that.
Awesome.
When do you need feedback from people by?
I don't think that it needs to be a buy.
Right.
I mean, we want to make sure that we're responsive to you all as the year goes on.
Or, yeah.
But we certainly, want to make sure that as we build agendas, they're responsive to issues and needs. I'll say, as an example, if this body said, we really want to know more about what you're going to do if you get that funding for the regional transportation safety plan, we really want to dig into that, then we would look at that schedule for that project more distinctly and think about proposing a meeting schedule for you all that fits into the timeline of that scope, so that we were making sure that the CTAC input was incorporated at the right junctures of that. If you said we want to do that and something, so we would kind of try to practice that. So, I think what we're trying to do is move away from, well, the meeting date is on this day, so we can't talk about that because we're not ready for it. And we can't talk about that because it's too late. And so we're going to talk about this instead. And it might not really, so I'm not giving you a great answer, I'm sorry, but
Okay.
it's kind of, we want to try to make sure that we're scheduling the meetings with the content and the timing that is responsive to what you all care about. And it's okay if you don't know right now.
Right, okay.
We can talk about it again at the next meeting.
Be good food for thought certainly for the next meeting, maybe a potential agenda item, Champ.
Yeah, just one more.
Yeah.
We got a new administration in, and we're right here in Richmond. I would love to have some high-level agency heads or undersecretaries brief us on priorities for the new administration to give us their high-level understanding and then allow us to figure out where we can apply that locally in the region. So they're right here. Let's get them in to brief us.
Can I ask you just we did have Maria Zimmerman join the policy board at the April meeting. And I think that it might be hard to get her again on the schedule.
Right.
Would you all be open to some sort of a joint event with other members of the TAC and the policy board to kind of maximize that invitation?
Oh, absolutely. But still, we've got, the Secretary of Transportation, DRPT, and there are a lot of areas though that, I don't know what their priorities are, but I'm sure it's quite different from the last administration.
Sure.
that opens up great opportunities for us.
We can absolutely send out as part of the follow-up, the recording at the timestamp of when Director Zimmerman addressed the policy board, but I think that that's a great idea. And I think we could probably get them to put us on our calendar if we had the totality of the NPO as the audience. That's a great idea.
So I also kind of point to you all, I guess, maybe it's page 2 of your agenda, when you look at the Unified Plan Working Program document. Paragraphs down is sort of our, I don't know if it's the mission statement, but it's the advisory component of the CTAC. Advises the RRTPO on issues, plans, matters appropriate for citizen input, and ensures we're connecting to and engaging with the diverse people in our region. So are you sort of asking sort of what are our strategic plan concepts we'd like to see in the near future to kind of align with that?
Yeah, this is an excerpt from the bylaws
Yep.
that describes the CTAC's purpose. So I think we're endeavoring to understand relative to the CWP,
Yeah.
knowing what our agenda is for this year. What are those issues, plans, and matters that you would like to engage with?
One of the things I think I've heard over the past several months of this group is, and Andrew kind of extenuated it with the Commonwealth Transportation Board's funding component, is this is complex stuff. And as citizens coming in off the street, we may not necessarily know everything, how it all kind of works, how it all kind of puts together. So and I've noticed the CTV is doing this now with their CTV meeting. First time the new administration is doing this, is kind of walking through those appointed folks, how things work, how the funding kind of comes in. So kind of understanding how all that works is probably a good component for this group, I think.
Great.
You know, how the Commonwealth, how Chet's group is leveraging dollars to make the programs here in the area work better. For these folks to kind of hear would be a good thing.
Okay.
Just my thought. Andrew?
Yeah, I guess speaking from like a representing Richmond standpoint, I know that pedestrian and bike safety are extremely important to Richmonders right now because we have that long string of deaths in the city. And I'm very interested in Task 12, and I'd love to know more about Task 12, about the selecting a high entry network corridor, and like what that will look like, and I'd love to have some more detail on that, because I know that's something that everybody in my community cares a great deal about right now. I'm always trying to convince more people to walk and bike in the city, and they are very concerned about whether or not it's safe to do so.
In our name is the word advisory. Hypothetically, we are supposed to be knowledgeable people who pass grassroots information on up to the next step. And it might be helpful if we have a 10-minute session each time to talk about what's being discussed and what decisions are being made at the TPO.
It's a great idea.
Yep.
We could do a preview of what we know is on the upcoming meeting.
Yeah.
And then have you all. Yeah, and then that I think would actually give, not to speak for you, Chair Dixon, but I mean, that would give the chair who's representing the CTAC at that policy meeting material.
Yep. Very true. Very
Because
true.
when we have discussions down at our level, people want to know, well, what's happening? You know, what highways are being done? What's the future plans, that type of thing. And that would be very helpful of saying, well, this is what's being done and decisions that are being made.
So for one of the bits of feedback, and I kind of glazed over this, but one of the bits of feedback that we got through the federal certification review is to get more specific or discrete on the timeline of the deliverables for the various work program items. And so, sorry, I'm scrolling through on here to find that section, but I think what we could think about, so here's an example on the P-quad, we have, these sort of loose timeframes. We could put together, I think, a document for the CTAC to review that could start to show when we anticipate particular topics coming to the policy board over the course of the coming year. And then you all could say, we really want to, what I need to do is say, well, next week, the policy board's meeting on this, and you haven't had time to really think about things and that kind of thing. So we could kind of map out the year as we know it right now. And then we could start to think about slotting topics for your CTAC meetings that are
based on.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that make sense what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
exactly.
And then you
Yeah.
can give that back to you, I think, at the July,
Right.
you meet again in July, I think. Is that true?
So
So we could, that could give you that, you'd always have that room on your calendar, on your meeting agenda, but you'd have line of sight to what's coming forward in the.
Right,
in
and
the
it would be
future.
nice to have just a little reminder of, folks, this is what's coming up. This is what's being discussed. Do you have any comments right now? Or, just so that your constituents can know what's going on.
Yeah, and I know best laid plans, right? We can do that on a number of things. There are other things, quite frankly, Carrie, you can attest to this. I mean, we just don't get a whole lot of notice on some of the things the policy board will be acting on, but there are other things that we absolutely can. So I think we could give you that, and that could be just an evolving list that's of the things, so you always know.
Thank you.
Good stuff. Any other comments?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate that. Next item is the community engagement update. Kristen, are you still in a good spot?
I think so. I'm right next to, the food hall, the best place, right? I just want to mention that while I was on the train this morning, 6 a.m. in Ashland, beautiful, watch the sunset going through Fredericksburg. And people were putting their bikes on the train and they seem to know exactly where they go. And they were coming around and asking about recycling. So it's been a great trip so far. And I'm glad to be here with you. I'm going to be pretty brief because you have the CTAC news in front of you and there's some presentations coming up. So I want you to be able to really dig into some of the engagement and updates from LRTP and safety and TIP. As I do every meeting, I hope that these are helpful. So if they are not, please let me know. You can send me a private message or you can email me and say, these are sort of, not as helpful as they could be, or I'd rather see something else. But what we want to do is tell you kind of what's open now across more things than just transportation. So the three things we've collected here are that there is an open public review and comment period for the air quality conformity assessment. That is required because of non-attainment in the 90s, but we've been in attainment and doing great since then, and we are coming up on the end of that 20-year period where we would submit these reports. But actually, it's kind of nice to, when I'm talking to the community, to tell people not only do we have a regional air quality plan, that we are thinking about these types of impacts that our transportation development has. So people are able to review the draft plan through June 14th. So if you want to share that back in the community, we hope you will, especially with folks who are even getting up to speed on the long range transportation plan. This could kind of be an opportunity to just like a way in, and then to look back on the Engage site at some of the data and the second phase, what we heard, some themes and such. We put that information on there. So you'll see a section on the LRTP that says data captured or data completed, input completed, and you'll see both all three phases. Actually, there'll be the first vision and values, and then you'll see a little bit about the goals we brought out, the regional goals, and then of course looking at the investment packages. Carrie's going to lead you through more about what happened and the exciting news about that. I also want to share with you, and I think I meant to be sharing my screen, so I'm going to quickly do that now. The second item is RVA Weaver Awards. And so what those are, it's really a huge boon for the region. I've been having a great time going around in Goochland and Powhatan and New Kent recently, and Charles City recently, making sure that folks are aware that these awards are for all of us. I, of course, can't apply, and I'm not going to be on the review team, so I'm able to tell everybody I know. But these are regional awards, sometimes called microgrants, but they are part of a national movement of community weaving. There's an organization called Weave, the Social Fabric Project at the Aspen Institute that has deployed 25 different community hosts across the country. We applied last fall and we were selected. So in fact, the region really has been selected to find, nominate, have them apply, select, and then award a minimum of 20 weavers in the region. These grants are $2,500 to $5,000 each. You can learn a lot more on this site. There is a handout that hopefully you picked up when you walked in, but there's some more on the table. We have a recorded info session, so this would be a wonderful way, I think, for you to, maybe do some sort of deep dive into, what the awards are, who's eligible. And I'm sorry, I have some guests right near me. Hopefully you can't hear all that. And the info session is about 27 minutes long. So I'll stop sharing that now, and just let you know that the other pieces on there, they are just the recycling barriers study is coming up. We partnered with CVWMA. Again, we're going to be going around the community over the summer and talking with people about what are barriers for recycling. Our landfills are filling up, and CVWMA definitely wants to know, what can be improved, what kinds of needs do people see, and again, public input is really important to everything we do here. So that's all for me, but I do invite you again to share with me any feedback on the CTAC news. You'll see on the back side places we've been more recently, places we're heading. I will say we were at the Speed Symposium in the city last night, and maybe Dan or Carrie you can see them in the hallway and share a little bit more about that. But thanks so much, and I'll see you back. Happy holidays, everyone. Memorial Day.
Kristen, thank you very much. Appreciate you trudging through on that on your travels there. So good stuff on that. And Carrie, you're up already here. You're ready to go. Do you want to provide any feedback from last night? Did you attend last night's event?
I was not there last night, no.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
I know Richmond City had a safety symposium last night. Saw something about that. So I don't know. Did anyone go to that?
Yeah.
What were your thoughts on it?
Hey, I know new phase starting to get ramped up in here. So glad, happy to be with you all. So I was invited by Andy Bano as one of the speakers to talk through the lens of speed management and pedestrian safety through the lens of public transit. So he had a good eclectic group of folks who talked about the young people and students and how multimodal transportation makes for a better, thriving, safer region. So I thought it was well done, good community representation, as well as a lot of city departments were there to figure out how all these issues work together. So kind of high level.
Good deal. It's a good conversation to have, and I know they got some media publicity out of it, so good stuff on that. All right, Carrie.
Hi, my name is Carrie Wagenhauser. I'm pleased to be here today to talk to you all about some of our community engagement efforts. Community engagement is essential because it bridges the gap between decision makers and residents. Actively involving people in planning ensures policies address actual needs, builds trust, and fosters a shared sense of ownership and empowers historically underrepresented voices. Please remember when viewing the results of these surveys that they do have impressive response metrics. However, they are likely skewed because of the people that have responded, have gone out of their way to answer these kinds of surveys. Just please keep that in mind. So safety is current and it runs through every single project we do. Specifically, we look at crash data, monitor trends, set performance targets, and we understand where risk exists and how they're changing. But it's not just about the numbers. We also coordinate closely with our boards, like you all, our localities, partner agencies, and make sure safety is built into every part of our planning work. We also focus on near misses and other warning signs so we can identify unsafe conditions before serious crash happens. Safety is really the anchor that guides everything that follows in this presentation. So these are the results of our safety surveys that we put out. Above those boxes are the questions. If you can see my little tiny mouse on the screen, I know it's not necessarily the largest. There we go. So the questions are right here, and then these are the responses. We got many responses. And like I said, they're very likely skewed just because of the people that went out of their way to answer a study. Residential areas. People are most likely strongly to disagree that it is okay to speed, which is a weird way to say that, but basically it just means they don't think people should speed there. Makes sense. It could be due to the implied presence of walking and children. It's also very likely true for urban areas and school zones. People also don't think it is okay to speed in construction zones, likely because of the dynamic nature of these areas. People moving around, lanes changing, that type of thing. People also seem to strongly disagree that it is okay to look at your phone on the road, showing a strong disdain for distracted driving. So what you can see on the bottom here is strongly disagree is right under this big dark column. And there's a 1 right there. So the average goes all the way up to 5. So the average is 1.4. It's right in between disagree and strongly disagree.
And how many responses does this capture?
This had over 1,000.
Yeah, I appreciate the people who strongly agree on all of these.
Yeah.
They-
We're hypocrites.
Yeah.
So these are kind of the breakdown. It goes from the people that agree the most, which is 1.9, which is still in the disagree category for the average. And then at the bottom, it's 1.2, which is the most disagreeable, if that makes sense. We disagree with all of it, but we most strongly disagree with it being okay to drive over the speed limit in a school zone.
None of these people obviously have been rear-ended by somebody on the phone like I was on 95.
They're saying it's not okay to drive
Okay.
and be on your phone. On the other end of this polarizing scale, we showed the inverse was also true. They agreed that the road should be engineered for less speed, drivers should yield, and pedestrians should have the time to walk across the street. Overall, they believe that the deck should be stacked in the pedestrians' favor to reduce negative interactions between cars and people. Pedestrian meaning cyclists, walkers, rollers, basically people that don't have a little bubble around them of metal when they're moving around the roads. These statements and responses reflect a willingness to bend for safety and show how common it is for other drivers to speed. So down here, you can see how many people are strongly agreeing that they support safer conditions and things like traffic calming, crosswalks, push button crossings, bike lanes, things of that nature. And then people also are saying that they see people speed a lot in this community, which is unfortunate, but I can also agree with that. So then people felt most strongly it was acceptable to implement minor changes to help pedestrians and other road users. We're moving over to the TIP, which is our Transportation Improvement Program, our short-term funded action list. I personally think of this like a grocery list. You know that you have the money for things in your cart. You know that you are going to use these in the next week, month or so. Time moves different in a regional scale. Our week is there 4 years. So we got some feedback. Basically, overall, they think we are spending too much on highway projects and not enough on transit and other projects of that nature. I will say that we are spending a lot of money on highway projects. However, a lot of those projects do include things like sidewalks and other, helpful things for pedestrians. Overall, people do not feel strongly one way or the other about the projects in this region. They don't love them, they don't hate them. And then people also felt like they understood the TIP a bit more than when they started, but overall, not too much more. The average was 63 out of 100, so. The LRTP is the region's long-term transportation blueprint. It looks 20 to 25 years in the future. It lays out the vision for goals, major investments, and what we need to support growth, safety, mobility, and economic development. It's also fiscally constrained, meaning we can only include projects we can reasonably expect to fund. So the way that I think of this project is it's kind of like your house renovations. These are things that you might not have the money in your bank account right now to fund, but these are the things that you can, if you save and you play your cards right, you can likely spend this money on flooring repair or something like that in the next 10, 15 years. Again, time moves differently in the region. This is 20 to 25 years for them. The response to this was overwhelming. People really wanted mode shift. That's this big blue line. I believe it was about 60%. I can't really see right here on there. But people, again, echoed what we heard in the TIP. They want to shift money away from highways. They want to heavily invest in transit, biking, walking, prioritize safety, sustainability, all of those lovely things, and alternative access or alternative transportation methods. So you were asking how many people had looked at these. So these are all of the things, all of the metrics that we can see on our back end. So my personal favorite is visitors in this yellow box right here. This is going to show you how many people saw and spent time on this page. These are individual people. This is, you know, visits and views are a little bit more complicated because that's how many people, how many times the page was looked at, not by individual IP address, if that kind of vibes with anybody. People often will go back and visit or like check to see if there's results from any of the surveys or anything of that nature. Contributors are individual people. You can see what I'm kind of circling right there. There we go. So we had the most with the safety plan for contributors, and then we had the least with the tip. Does anyone have any questions? We've built in time to talk about these things. These are some of our in-person photos from in-person things that we've done. I'm sure some of you were at some of these. Does anyone have questions, comments, concerns? I know, Kristen, I just saw your hand go up.
Carrie, I just want to share that the way that it works on our Engage site is that when you enter in paper surveys, it's a one person, and that happened a lot with safety and with LRTP as well. We were entering them in on behalf of neighbors who responded on a paper survey. So they're not going to be counted as those contributors. So we want to make sure that that's a caveat, that the contributors, you know, we entered maybe 75 or maybe 130 of the safety plan at least. I think Dan might have that number, and they wouldn't be counted because it's one IP address contributing.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, the 1,050 responses, this is clearly statistically significant. Has this been presented to the TPO yet?
I'm not sure about that. My personal responsibility is the tip, not the safety plan. So I'm not 100% sure if that's been presented to the TPO yet.
Or Martha, I mean, TPO needs to see this.
The regional safety plan, the input that Carrie just supported, no, it was not. We collected that input, if I'm not mistaken. Kristen, are you still with us through the end of March? Yep. And it was not included on the April agenda just because there were, so it's scheduled for the upcoming fiscal year.
Okay. I mean, there's good data and there's a clear trend there.
Yeah.
Hopefully the decision makers need to realize this is what people want.
Yes. So I'll say two things. I mean, the policy board in February approved our regional safety targets for the year. And so there was ample discussion about this. I think we're waiting, frankly, in a bit of a holding pattern to see if that funding comes through to be able to take the safety plan to life. And this public input was in part collected to advise kind of what should those next steps be. So this summer, if not in September, I think we'll be coming back to the policy board with recommendations. So again, I think this is that kind of opportunity for us to think about as we queue up those conversations with the policy board, what role would you all want to have in nudging that forward?
Okay. Or a big kick forward.
Yeah, I mean, safety's been the biggest priority I've seen the policy board dig into almost in 10 years. So I don't think that there's any apprehension on their part that this is not one of our top priorities. I think what the safety measures look like across the region are obviously very different.
I got sort of a couple of comments following up on Champ on the LRTP, not just the safety, but the LRTP, that there was a big thing made of, we're going to have scenario planning. People are going to be able to see what kind of mix we want. And it was, you know, a great majority of people, at least who participated, felt strongly in the mode shift. And for those people who may be disappointed, maybe this is the best way to ask it, what can they do in the future is there any time left in terms of the LRTP, or, you know, what kind of advocacy is even possible to, you know, make the point on the mode shift, more transit, more bike ped, less highway extensions?
So I'll say from a process perspective, public engagement on the LRTP is not over. So certainly members of the public can continue to weigh in. The projects that were approved by the policy board in April, that was a necessary step in the process so that we can run each of those projects through for conformity. We can't, Carrie, correct me
No,
if I'm
you're good.
wrong.
You're saying
Not
good
in-
things right now.
We cannot include any projects in the LRTP that don't maintain our conformity.
Correct. Yes. So we were out of conformity in 97. We are still basically building back trust with the feds above us to show that we are going to basically keep our environment good and we are going to continue to follow the path that we've been on. We are about to get out of that, which does mean we are going to lose some funding because we had basically like a leg up to boot, like to have good projects like this. So we do have to put everything through a conformity report, which basically means we are not going to further damage our air quality and put us back into non-attainment.
So I'll just say procedurally, that's important because should the policy board members decide for any reason, public input or otherwise, that they want to change the list that they approved in April, we would need to restart the conformity process for that. So I would say, you know, a staff position would not be that we shouldn't change the project list. The staff position would be if the policy board wants to change the project list, that will delay the delivery of the long range transportation plan, which would put all projects in jeopardy.
So
That-
there's really no,
Well, no, I think that the next step in that would be that once the long range transportation plan is adopted, it's a 5-year plan, but it is a living plan and it can be amended at any time. And as Carrie said, because we are in this near window where we will no longer have that conformity review, the down part is, you know, we'll have less dollars to address air quality because we will be in attainment. But on the upside of that, you know, the policy board has the authority to amend its long range transportation plan at any time over that 5-year cycle. And as we move forward for that next iteration, we can continue to think about what the implications of that mode shift are and how to really live into that over the course. I mean, yes, it's a long range transportation plan for 2050, but its life cycle is every 5 years. So.
and I had another kind of comment question so things are called highway funds. And as you noted, sometimes that means actually creating more space for pedestrians, cyclists and bus stops, all that. But that is not reflected. This is sort of a line, but that's not reflected in these descriptions. Sometimes it's a big question mark. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. So is there any way to break that down to say,
Like this percentage of projects includes a high,
or the purpose?
yeah.
Yeah, the purpose is for this, or.
Well, so I will say that like the purpose is where you kind of get a little bit into the nitty gritty of like, if we're like, depending on how we define purpose, like, are we defining it by like how many people are going to use that, how many dollars we're spending on it? Like, that's where it does get a little bit in the weeds of like, we have to have a consistent way that we're explaining it. We can't just like, you know, like we could definitely do something where it's like, this project includes, this is the percentage of projects that include a sidewalk or a shared use path or something like that, that has like a real, I'm not counting shared use path as like the sharrows. I'm not a fan of this personally, but I would definitely say that is something doable where we can say like, you know, this subset of projects includes active transportation, alternative transportation type of thing.
Included. Okay. I think that might make people feel better or worse as the case would be, you know, in understanding the mode situation.
Because transparently, the way that we define these projects is from the federal.
Oh, right.
So it like.
It has to say highway and.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
think that this is the kind of conversation that is good feedback for us, though, to be able to figure out how to. We have to deal with the definitions and the vocabulary that we get, but how do we start to make it more clear what these projects actually are? I mean, this is precisely, I think, that the dialogue we want to have with you all to advise, not just the policy board on their decisions, but us on how to make this information more clear about what we're actually talking about and be honest about really, does it truly represent mode shift or is it still kind of not?
So kind of a follow-up to Sarah. I know we've been in attainment on congestion mitigation for some years. Are we still getting funds? Because at one point, it was like $30 million a year, wasn't it?
We still get CMAQ money now.
We still have that funding, but the second that we don't have to do, like, if you've ever watched a policy board or a TAC meeting, how we have to like say that this has passed air quality conformity for that project, or like it like didn't change or anything like that. Once we don't have to do that, we do lose that CMAQ funding.
So philosophically, it seems like multimodal shifts is all about congestion mitigation. Is there, can we, I guess, who would make the decision? All right, we got $30 million and let's philosophically start using some of that money towards modal shift to achieve those goals. Is that, am I totally living in la la land?
So that funding is, we have our flexible regional funding. We actually just determined the projects that are going to be getting that. So there's a process, there's a scorecard. It actually very much resembles a smart scale scorecard. So the idea is we can use those funds to help our localities leverage to get smart scale money. Kind of a like, we'll give you $1, they'll give you 100 type of thing. Which it doesn't necessarily help score some of our projects that are smaller, or not necessarily smaller, but like alternative transportation. There's some kinks that need to be worked out of that system.
When does CMAQ money disappear? Now that we're in attainment.
So we've been in attainment since 97. So I believe we lose it next year. I don't quote me on that. I could be wrong. It's imminent. Again, the way that time works different for a regional organization than it works for me.
It's still around $30 million a year.
I believe it is. It's a good amount of money. Yeah. I'm sorry, I don't have it off the top of my head.
29.5 seems to stick in my mind for some reason.
Yeah, we just went through all of our existing projects, which automatically, once they get money from the TPO, if they need more and they follow the correct channels and everything like that, they almost always get that funding approved.
Would it be maybe just taking the previous conversation from before, and I mean, this is one of those examples of sort of how all these things it gets complicated kind of fast. Would this be a good topic to kind of dive into at our upcoming meeting so we could really understand the implications of conformity as it relates to funding, as it relates to the mode shift priorities in the LRTP, so that the piece is kind of like that I think we could talk to Miles about how to bring that kind of a conversation to this group. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. Yeah. Just to kind of see, I think that makes a lot of sense because it's clear that there's a directional path they want to go, but they have to all kind of understand the implications of all those things.
Kind of a look behind the curtain a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Any other questions? I mean, we got time. This was a short presentation. We can. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I also had questions about CMAQ, so I would love to hear more about it.
Is that just, I'm just asking a clarifying question. Do you have questions about how we allocate those funds or questions about CMAQ as a like money pot?
I'm interested in both. I'd be curious to know what it has been spent on in recent years and if there are plans to continue that type of spending with different money when CMAQ is going away.
That's definitely doable. I'm just making notes for myself. Anyone else? Questions? We got time. I am a transportation planner, so if anyone else has questions about transportation.
No, we appreciate that. Carrie, thank you very much. Very informative presentation. Obviously, a lot of questions there. So good stuff on that. Martha, you're up next. P-Quad. Did you hit everything you wanted to hit? Or you want to go a little deeper on P-Quad?
Yeah, if I can just touch on a
Sure.
couple things. Thank you for that. So I think it's relevant to this conversation. So, sorry, I'm trying to share my screen again.
Oh, you pulling it up, Martha?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's true. I've never read that, but you probably understand.
Okay. So kind of back to the UPWP, task 14 is our prioritization process pilot, P-Quad grant, as we were referring to it earlier. This just gives you a very high level overview of kind of where we are in the timeline for things. So since last fall and through this coming September, we'll be working on adopting our literature review and finalizing kind of we're like planning to plan right now, I guess is the best way to say it. Major components of this project, which I'll kind of go through, really are about how do we more fully round out our prioritization process using the transportation demand model as our kind of foundational piece. This is the tool that we use to say, if we invest in this segment, whether it's highway or whether it's bike and pedestrian facilities or this transit infrastructure, if we invest in this segment, what's it going to do to congestion, air quality, other of our transportation related measures? Our desire, as we've moved through the scenario planning process, is to be able to incorporate more outcome implications in that calculation, so we can better understand kind of the holistic view of what the impact of said investment will be on the built environment, on the economic conditions of the community, on pressures that might exist because of that development. So think about like all the good things that we have that we've seen from the Pulse, the BRT East-West line. Lots of really good outcomes of that. There's also the reality that some neighborhoods have been activated in new ways that have increased housing affordability pressures. And so how can we start to understand the intended and unintended impacts of investment across our region? I don't know that we're going to get all the way there in this model update, but that's sort of the kind of global desire. So this prioritization process pilot program is helping us to reinvest in that transportation demand model in a new way to be able to make it a more robust tool to inform that decision making, and also to be able to publish the results of those calculations in a way that are more transparent for the public. I think right now the model feels like, at least for me, this sort of abstract thing. You know, it's like a bunch of coding and calculations over here, and it's this just thing that happens, and we don't really talk about it in a very concrete, accessible way. And so Congress got feedback from their constituents that residents in their communities don't understand how decisions get made. What calculations, what information went in to make this decision happen? Why that and not this, that kind of thing. And so they funded this program to be able to support MPOs across the country, a select set of MPOs, to be able to invest in tools to make that decision-making process more transparent. That's sort of the premise of this project. So where we are in that process is really at that beginning stage, as you saw. And so our idea is to develop this new scoring system with some emphasis on calculating the economic ROI of those investments and being able to pull in a more robust set of impact analysis in alignment with our scenario planning framework that we've already adopted.
Hey, Martha.
Yeah.
Is this for every like funding program, or what's the what projects?
Yeah, so it's funded by Federal Highway Administration. So the thrust is really for the focus areas of the investment decisions that the policy board makes. So think CMAC, RSTBG, prioritization for smart scale submissions, recommendations for CBTA. But we see it as a tool that can be much more robust in that regard. And our long-term vision would be that this could be the tool that could evaluate investments, many different federal and state funding decisions that have been retrained.
Are you all the only MPO in Virginia who got this?
Yes. Yeah. Oops. So, the idea again is to be able to differentiate, you know, really how these decisions got made and make those decision makings a little bit more clear. And so that we can really, I think from a public engagement perspective, we can start to articulate what the trade-offs are in making decisions. So we can start to see, you know, well, if we do this and these are the implications, that may be a reason why we recommend that, why you recommend that a decision be made or not be made. The idea is also to be able to see how we could get to an outcome sort of through multiple paths. And it's, I mean, everything that we do in the public policy decision-making space is about deciding trade-offs. And so we can start to have, I think, a more global, but also a more holistic view of what that looks like. So again, our goal is that this could be something that could be used across all of the federal funded programs that we support and touch. We're obviously moving in that direction, but this would be the opportunity for us to start to cultivate that practice. And so one of the products from this is not just investment in that model, but to create this web-based interactive website where we could literally create a space for us and members of the public and all of our advisory groups and all of our decision makers to literally play with these different scenarios to kind of see, you know, if this, then that kind of situation. So the idea would be that we have a clearer idea or clearer lens of what the implications, at least the expected implications are of the different decisions and what those trade-offs are. And the idea at the end of the day is that if we deviate as a region or the decision-making body from the plan that's been put in place, we have the data that sits behind it that helps to articulate why that decision was made in that way. In reality, right now, there are existing kind of mechanisms for that to happen. We've got our long-range transportation plan. There will be, I'm sure, instances where the CVTA chooses to invest in a project that's not in the long-range transportation plan. That's allowable. And the idea is under the code, correct me if I'm wrong, but the code provides for the CVTA to develop their own decision-making process and prioritization process to justify the decisions that they're making for the allocation of those funds. So that's a good example of kind of what we're doing. This is really just a tool to be able to help inform those decisions. You know, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, in this to be able to think through why we would have exceptions to that priority ranking. And that's kind of what I was talking about with that CVTA example. Public engagement can certainly sway the decision-making process. We all see that happen many times over the years across our region. You know, there might be an opportunity for us to think a little bit differently about geographic balance, where it might not necessarily pencil out in a calculation, but for purposes of regional consensus building, partnership, those kinds of things. We already see examples of those kinds of decisions happening across the region already. And we might want to overinvest in particular neighborhoods because we want to address impacts that otherwise wouldn't really be taken care of. So lots of reasons why these types of things are coming on. In addition to the literature review, we're in this process right now where we need to do, according to the grant report or the grant terms, we need to do an assessment of the public's general understanding of how decisions get made today and their impressions of how clear that decision-making process is. And then we do like kind of a post-assessment on the end of this grant term. So one of the things that we're thinking through right now is how do we get input from the public that gives us that kind of baseline understanding of what's your understanding of the decision-making process? How confident do you feel in that? What questions do you have where they're kind of lacking clarity? And then on the post side, we would ask those same questions again to see if what we've been able to produce has moved the needle, hopefully in the positive direction to make that more clear and transparent. So we're thinking through that process right now, how we ask those questions. You know, we don't want to draw fire unnecessarily on an already complicated and complex decision-making process, but we want to get kind of that honest baseline of where we are so we can measure whether we're improving it. We also want to think about like, who do we ask that question to? Admittedly, probably if I were to walk downstairs right now and just find somebody wandering through the building, they might not necessarily be poised to answer some of these questions. So we've been thinking about, should we have more of kind of a focused stakeholder group that are somewhat kind of already engaged and evaluate that kind of pre-test and then do a post-test with that same group on the other side. I think we're trying to think through kind of the validity of this pre and post so that we can really effectively measure the impact of this work as opposed to it being like a random sampling that you're not going to even sample the same people twice. So those are the kinds of questions that we're thinking through right now. And we thought that the CTAC membership would be useful in helping us kind of work our way through this process as we build out the design for this project. Obviously, there's a lot of technical aspects that we'll have time over the course of the next 2 years to really draw you in, but this fundamental foundational work felt important to talk about with you all. So some things to kind of think about and chew on, and if there's input today, we'd love it. Also, we can have it as a topic for future meetings, especially in light of how you all have been talking today.
Martha, did you say that the CTAC itself is a unique feature of this PDC?
Be more what you mean. I want to make sure I understand your question. Not all MPOs have a CTAC. Is that what you mean?
How many of us are there?
Gosh, I don't know. That's a good question.
2 or 3 combined.
In the city?
The state, maybe 2 or 3 others
So out of like
have standing committee.
out
I
of
mean, because it
15.
sounds like if we're truly an amateur citizen advisory council, that's not professional, except James, of course. Transportation folks. This
They're not
would be your,
Andrew.
this would be your pre and post.
This is the idea.
This is it. I mean, I'm not fully aware of how decisions are made, so I would be excellent guinea pig, and perhaps measurable. So I just think you might not have to reinvent the wheel on that, unless you've already.
No, I mean,
you're already there.
I think we're sort of curious if you all would be interested in being our, you know, our control group. I mean, that's the right way to say it.
So, Martha, I mean, we know transportation planning is a complex topic. And I think to the average person on the street, but by bad analogy, it's like what is the best cure for heart disease? Is it lifestyle? Is it genetics? Is it surgical intervention? You know, the average person doesn't really care about all the nuances of a stent versus angioplasty, whatever. They're concerned with outcome.
Yeah.
I want to make sure when I get in the car, I'm seeing less traffic and I can get from point A to point B more quickly. So, you know, we can do a whole lot of modeling, but something, and I've seen this over the years a lot with transportation planning in my world, we frequently reinvent the wheel when there are other cases surrounding us where they've done this years ago. And a good example I'll give is Washington, D.C. I describe that transportation system as fragile. If anything goes wrong, it collapses on itself. But they've done a lot. They have great mass transit. They've got the metro system and bike and pedestrian up there. I've been to the COG meetings up there. They're saying that 4 to 6% of people are walking and biking. And when the metro goes down on a line, you look at the counters and there's an inverse relationship between the people that are biking and walking because they can't get the metro. With all that, to get off the soapbox, what I really think would be great would be for a staff member to engage other communities, other MPOs. What's worked for you? What does your data say? And instead of us, again, reinventing the wheel, learn by others' mistakes and use best practices in other and especially bigger communities that have been through some of the growing pains. And we can figure it out without having to, gosh, what could work?
So I will toot our horn a little bit. We are that region that folks are looking to. We invented the wheel. We're among the handful across the country that are leading the scenario planning work. And so when Chet was our director of transportation and when Sulab was here, we had a delegation from Monterrey, Mexico come here to learn about what we're doing. So I think that's part of the challenge. We are inventing the wheel. We're not reinventing it.
Right, but I'm sure there are multiple wheels.
Yeah.
And again, I'll
We're
point to
not-
DC.
We're in a consortium with
Yeah.
those other leading MPOs that are larger than us and better resource, but yes, heard loud and clear. That doesn't negate the need to have to do that pre and post testing with our community. So I don't know if I might not be answering or understanding your comment. Right.
Well, I think being able to view the projects that are being selected, where the funds are coming from is just awesome. Because sometimes when you go to look at, like, I think more transparency is always better. And sometimes when you try to look at VDOT's 6-year improvement program and you want to see, like, I love the I-64 GAN project. You want to see all the different funds that contributed. And sometimes the VDOT portal will just say, like, federal fund. Which one? There's 1,000. And so I think having that at the local level to show how the decisions are made, where the money's coming from, what went into it is a really, really cool tool. Big fan.
And Martha, I know we're out of time, but I wanted to say, I think that would be an excellent use of the CTAC. I think that would be a really good way to both make this body able to be more educated about something this complex and also to understand the best ways of educating people about that in the first place, because it's very difficult to explain how these things work.
Okay, so it sounds like the primer about just the funding globally in general, and then this issue with the LRTP, mixed mode shift and conformity CMAC, and then they all sort of kind of the thread starts to pull through. So it sounds like we've got some good stream of agendas for upcoming meetings.
Yes, sounds like.
Great.
Okay, good deal.
Thank you all.
And speaking of it, it is 1:30. We try to adjourn by 1:30. If you need to go, certainly understand you need to go. We're going to kind of continue on. If you're still okay presenting, if you're still got time, we'll kind of keep rolling. If you got to go, we understand. We'll get rolling from there. So.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
well, Davis Boudreau, Chamber RVA. I'll try to be brief. I want to thank Chet for coming. I've phoned a couple of friends. So Chamber RVA is the regional chamber, which you may know. Our jurisdiction has 9. We have 9 jurisdictions in our footprint, and our region is to our mission is to achieve regional harmony and love. And we're there. We're this close to being done. But it's a tall order. And one of the things that I'm relatively new to the chamber, 6 or 8 months now. not new to state government or government relations by any means. But one thing that the chamber does that I've learned is an amazing value to the region is what we call the intercity visit. Have you heard of it? Anyone heard of it? Yeah. Anyone been on it? A few, yeah. So we take representatives from each jurisdiction and we ship them off somewhere, and they do some networking and they bring home some best practices. And this year was the largest ever, 205.
Wow.
And we were in Phoenix, and I'm ready to move there, maybe 5 days too, because it was 85 every day. And it was like, this is great. You know, it's not hot. You got a great public transport system. It's walkable. There's arts. The art scene was very vibrant. It's just, you could feel like it was a cool place to be. I can't imagine being there when it's 120 for 3 days in a row. But in my mind, it's 85 3 days in a row. I'm sticking with that. So one of the things that we do on these visits is we have what are called tracks. And I used to work in affordable housing, so I headed that track. And then I am also a musician, so I headed that track of like the arts and culture one. And then a third optional one, I took folks to a museum. One of the tracks though was transportation. And their light rail system is fabulous. And so partially because I wasn't on it, but mainly because I'm not a transportation expert, I asked Chet if he would be kind enough to come. I said, you'll go right at the beginning of the meeting. You won't have to sit through the whole thing, I promise. And here he is. So Chet deserves the patience award. And anything you want to say about your transportation takeaways from Phoenix would be great.
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation. I will say that you are part of this committee, right? So you're a budding transportation expert. Yes. I'll take a couple minutes. I know we're over time to share just some facts and figures, maybe some comparisons between Richmond and Phoenix. Phoenix operates most of their transportation improvements through tax measures. There are two major ones that are active right now. The first is Proposition 479, which covers Maricopa County, which Phoenix is a part of, but it's their bigger regional tax measure. It was approved in 2024. It extends a 0.5% sales tax through 2045 and is expected to generate about $14.9 billion. That funding is split 40.5% freeways and highways, 37% public transit, and 22.5% for arterial and local streets. So we can kind of relate to how those funding splits are here versus there. The other one, which I think is very interesting, is the city of Phoenix itself has a tax measure called Transportation 2050. This was approved in 2015. It's funded by a 0.7% sales tax and runs through 2050. That's expected to generate about $16.7 billion in revenue, and 86% of those funds support public transit. So that's a huge difference than what we have in the Richmond region. Out of that funding, and most of that funding, the Valley Metro, which is a light rail system, is funded. It's extremely popular and used by just about everybody. It's an expectation that light rail is the connection. Some of the things we heard in some of the sessions were the main drivers of the light rail are commuters, students, and tourists. The light rail was put in because of the desire at the regional level to invest in higher education and making those options available for students and commuters. ASU, Arizona State, intentionally located their Phoenix campus to enable light rail connections to the main campus in Tempe and the Phoenix campus. And I think a comparison with CBTA, which I was very interested in. So Transportation 2050 is a 0.7% sales tax. It's the same percentage that we use to get part of our funding at CBTA is a 0.7% sales tax. So Phoenix is going to generate $16.7 billion over 35 years. Our projections are with that same sales tax in our region, we can generate about 6 billion over 35 years. So that tells you the huge difference in population and potential users and spending that Phoenix has versus what we have in Richmond. But it's still, those are all huge numbers, and it's something that I think we can all kind of connect to. I think in general, there's a lot of comparisons that we can make. There's a lot of things that we can say. Richmond is a little different, and we can't really compare the two metro regions. Obviously, Phoenix is, I think, the 5th largest metro in the country, if not higher up that ladder. But I think we were able to learn a lot. I think it tells me that the expenditures that we're making with BRT are wise and good use of money, and some of the benefits that we're gonna see when those expansions are made are gonna rival some of the ridership and usage that Phoenix has with their light rail system. I think, and this may be something that you all know, one final factoid is for every a mile of light rail is right now about 300 million to construct. And a mile of bus rapid transit is about 35. So the savings that we see through expansion of BRT with the GRTC system is huge in comparison. Doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but yeah, I think the benefits are something that we're going to be experiencing in the next 5-10 years when that expansion happens. I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
Sure.
you. And the funding model was, the similarity is interesting. So the trolley tracks are still under some of our streets, right?
Yes.
So it might not be 300 million, it might be 228.
Yeah. Oh, one more fact to it. I thought this was really interesting, and I actually moderated the panel in Phoenix on the transportation track. But 1867 is an interesting year. So 1867. The city of Phoenix was founded. In 1867 in Richmond, we were already having protests about segregation on our streetcars. So the history here is a long one, fraught with conflict, as we all know, but we were the first streetcar suburb. We had electric streetcars, I think first in the country, and I think we've got a legacy to uphold.
Thank you. Anything you want to add or take away?
I'll just say, I mean, I think it is relevant to this group. I got to participate in a track that was led by Sportable. We went to Ability 360, which was just this incredible facility that applied real, true universal design to their activity and active living center. It was a full-size gym, like basketball gym, 2 gym facilities side by side, rock climbing walls, like gym weightlifting equipment that were fully accessible to people who use different types of wheelchairs. It was just such an incredible center to be able to tour and walk around and hear about the programming that they do and the athletic equipment that they have for people of all abilities to actively participate. But one of the fascinating things about it in that sort of transference of learning and kind of going on what Chet said, the inherent differences of the topography in Phoenix make a lot of that possible. And the newness of their city make a lot of that possible. This is a city that was built post ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. And so it's just really fascinating to see how when we compare our cities to one another, I found the Phoenix leaders to be really generous in understanding and appreciating our history and the lessons that we have learned, but the realities of the history that we have here and how some things we can adapt and learn from, but we can't pick up what they have there and bring it here for some really legitimate reasons. And I found this visit to be one of the most responsive to that in a way that we actually can take a lot more ideas and adapt them to here because the speakers presented them in ways that took that into consideration. I think that that's a credit to you and your colleagues for how you prep the program.
I won't take credit. My colleagues worked really hard on it, but I'll share that. Thank you. Yeah, it was great. That's all I got. Any questions or you can join Chamber RVA. Let me.
Good comments, really good insight. Yes, something else to add, Chet. Good. I'm reminded, I am a former chamber employee myself years ago who planned city visits in San Antonio, Seattle, Portland. We were going to do the Riverwalk. We were going to build the Riverwalk here in Richmond. Still a little ways to go just yet, but keep working. I think one of the key interesting takeaways is their local government entity and how those are structured. With Virginia so separated, I think that's a common block that we've got to deal with one way or the other and try and figure out how to overcome some of those barriers. So I was just curious if they had a similar form of government, or they have more of a county, more of a regional.
They have, they are a Dillon state, so that was a nice, nice opportunity for us to compare some apples to apples. I'll say similar situation. We heard some pretty heated feedback about the legislature and the relationship between the state legislature and local government sounded pretty rough this year for the
Or in both places, yes.
both capital cities. So we had some similarities there. The local government structure is a little bit different. The three cities in the Phoenix, so it was Phoenix, Tempe, and I think Mesa.
That sounds right.
Are the three kind of primary cities, but they have cities that are all encompassed in Maricopa County. So that part was different. Much like, like a Charlotte Mecklenburg kind of sort of a similar symmetry with probably more with that than with us. But we heard from 4 mayors, I think, and it was a lot more that I think we could envision similarity than where it just felt like we had to block because it was different.
Yeah, it's great. Good stuff. A lot of work goes into it, but certainly know that. So good stuff on that. Appreciate that.
I mean, the only thing I would not be worthy of my paycheck if I didn't say it. I think that's one thing that Chamber RVA brings, right, is that unity to the disparate and completely not always friendly jurisdictions. So we're trying, and we need everyone's help around the table too. So,
And if I can say one more thing,
Please, yeah.
sorry. You mentioned the 205 attendees. Christy said this morning that 25% of those were local elected and appointed officials. I think this is the highest participation from local government. And we had 8 of our 9 member jurisdictions on the trip this year. And
Yeah.
only once in my tenure have we ever gotten to 10. So this was a big deal to have so many appointed and elected leaders together, able to talk with business leaders, able to talk with each other and cross jurisdictions. So you guys do a ton
Thanks.
of programming, but the social capital is really important too.
Thank you. Yeah, nonprofits too. Are part of it. I mean, I think typically maybe 1 or 2, maybe the board chair and another member will come, but I think Hanover had their entire board there. Richmond had 3 council folks.
Henrico was all there. Henrico were almost all there, and
Yeah.
Chesterfield were almost all there.
Jurisdictions understand they got to roll up their sleeves, and if they can do it in a place where there's perhaps not as much scrutiny, so say other side of the country, maybe more can get done. That's how we think about it.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Thank you very much. Next item, partner meeting updates. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. This month, I just wanted to focus on some recent developments with GRTC. There are a number of things that are going on with them that I think might be of interest to this group if you haven't heard. First of all, last month at their April meeting, they approved a contract for the architectural and engineering services for the western extension of the Pulse BRT line from Willow Lawn to Durham Road. So as Chet was mentioning, that's going to get underway. The schedule for that calls for completion of the plans by August of 27 and construction between April 28th and September 29. So it looks like it'll be about late 29 before we actually have service. The contract for that has been approved. Also last month, the board approved a contract for construction management, engineering and inspection services for the installation of more shelters and benches. 44 shelters and 28 benches will be going on. And that's going to be completed by the end of this year. So that should be more evident to us here. This past Tuesday, you may have heard this in the news, they approved their operating budget for FY27. It's a little over $100 million. And it assumes continuation of fare-free service. So that's some good news there on that front. They've also completed what they call their regional public transportation plan. This is a requirement in order for them to continue to receive the CDTA funding. And their plan anticipates that they're going to receive on the order of about $35 million. And they're going to expend about 33 million of that and put 2 million into a reserve. So they have to tell us basically how they intend to spend the CBTA funding. So they have completed that plan. And finally, they have announced they're having a Tap into Transit event, July 14th, 4:30 to 7:30 up here at Main Street Station. It's a community fundraising event. It's celebrating the impact of open access transit. And they're having a silent auction. So there might be some things to bid on there. So that might be an opportunity. Again, July 14th, 4:30, 7:30 at Main Street Station. That's my report, sir.
Awesome, Ken, thank you very much. Greatly appreciate that. Rolling into the last little bit, we should be able to finish up here fairly quickly, hopefully. Looking forward to next steps. CTAC member congrats. Just a couple of shout outs to a couple of folks still in the room here. One, Andrew Bunn, and then also a former CTAC chair, Sarah Erickson, both recently completed their masters in urban and regional planning. Great to be to you. What's also important to note for Andrew is he won the plan off event there with the competition. What was your presentation on?
My capstone project was proposing a resilience micro hub network in Richmond and planning and beginning the implementation of the first one in Hillside Court in Southside.
Cool, cool, very good. Congratulations. Yeah, great stuff. Good stuff. Also, real quick, just James just recently got an Ideal Award from the Rappahannock Community College. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do we know these things? Huh?
I know that.
We find these things out. So James actually is an adjunct faculty member there, and you teach political science. So the Ideal Awards are for employees who exemplify the college's values of integrity, diversity, and inclusion, excellence, access, and learning for life through performance and services, whose exceptional professional accomplishments, contributions, and activities support the mission of the college. Big stuff, lots of words. So congratulations.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. So staff found those things. I did not. And they just wanted to make sure we highlight some of everyone here trying to do some of the connectivity piece on this. One of the things they kind of wanted me to touch base on was checking to see, when we first would get here, the first 20 minutes is sort of a social networking piece, having the lunch and just kind of sitting around and chatting with folks. Do you all like that? Do you want to continue it? Do you want to pause that and just kind of get into the business stuff and move on? And we talked a little bit about it beforehand, and you can either say something now or you can say something to me later, and I'll provide feedback to the staff. Obviously, you don't necessarily have to come if you don't want to. You can come 15, 20 minutes late and show up, but that's just something to look at and think about on that, just going into that. I do think that our conversations are getting much more robust. Partly because of that, I think we're starting to get to know each other a little better and kind of engage in that piece, but it kind of helps us kind of figure this stuff out. So I want to throw that out as an additional piece on this. If you have additional feedbacks on that, please let me know. The other piece on this is member share, like Tomas just did. We want to try and do some member share or some of the things you may have going on. Ideally, they would like to see 2 or 3 of us present each time in order to get through a cycle. And so I'm looking to see if anyone is willing to volunteer for the next meeting, which I think is scheduled for July. We'll talk about that because I was like, I don't see it on my calendar, even though it's supposed to be July 14th. It's like, we may not be having it in July. So just throwing that out. That's one of the things I was thinking I can volunteer to talk about Henrico's traffic calming initiatives. I don't know if you're all aware of that, but if you live in Henrico, they've narrowed a lot of the streets and they have severely lowered the speed limits in the suburbs. Speed humps. There's some speed humps out there, which I don't mind. I don't see them as much, but the reduction of speed limits was very frustrating at first, but you get used to it and it's like, you know what? I can be calm in the neighborhood. It's no big
Also
deal.
more protected bike lanes.
Yeah, it protects everyone.
And there are more roundabouts.
There are some more around. So I'll talk more about that and what's going on there. If anyone else has anything, anyone else want to, James, love it.
We should have a state budget by then.
Man, you are going out on a limb there.
If we don't, we're in shutdown.
Well, that is true. That is true. We'll see what we get on that. Anyone else want to volunteer anything?
I was gonna join in just to kind of catch up on the get to know you, what we've been doing at RV Rapid Transit. I'm still new to Richmond, so
Okay.
maybe by then I have something
Welcome.
to share.
Glad you're here.
Yes.
Okay.
Hey, Gordon, I've got a quick one. I was up in Northern Virginia and found out that you need a flex pass on the HOV lanes. And in Richmond, if you weren't using them once a month, they were charging $5 a month for them. And there are no flex pass, facilities in Richmond. And if you don't have a flex pass, you got 5 people in your car, but you don't have a flex pass, you get hit with a toll. So get the DMV and get your flex pass. It's free now. And don't learn the hard way like that.
Great comment. So I appreciate that. Yeah, Andrew. Sid,
Kristen, I don't know.
thank you. Kristen's still there.
$64.
Weigh in.
I just have a quick one. I did put it in the chat, but you're mostly in person. Just want to say Ernest, Sarah, ERA, Jordan, Charlie, Bob, Upton, thank you for your LRTP engagement with the community and connecting us. We did events. You either came and supported or helped set those up. It was very helpful. And also for the safety plan, Sarah and Jordan. So great job, CTAC.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Final thing is the fiscal year 27 leadership and meeting schedule. It's supposed to be Martha, but she probably had to be
Yes, she had to run.
detained. So Sarah Keel, what can you do?
Okay, so typically we meet on a regular cadence. We wanted to check before just sending out those meeting dates and saying this is when we're meeting, to poll the group and just make sure, because July is kind of a sleepy time, right? A lot of people are on vacation. It's not always the best time for a meeting. So we wanted to ask and make sure that a regular anticipated meeting in July would work for the group versus pushing to August.
Are you looking at the third Thursday, which would be
Yes.
July 16th?
Train 19 en route to New Orleans for the intermediate stop.
Probably.
Kristen, can you mute?
Awesome.
Thank you.
July 16th, we want to meet.
I'd say that, a lot of vacation set up. I'm not going on anything. We can't afford it this year. But wife's been spending a lot of money. But if there's not anything critical coming up, we might want to take a hiatus. Have our next meeting maybe in September.
Well, we don't want to push too late because we need to elect our FY27 leadership for the rotation. So per our guidance documents that are online in the bylaws, we have a rotation. So after Chair Dixon would be Charles City. So we would need to go ahead and instate that leadership. We don't want to wait and not have any meetings, but I wanted to make sure if that July 16th date does not work for people, then we need to find an alternative.
I'm good.
Yeah, yeah, let's meet.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Okay, then that's good. I mean, again, it doesn't have to be we meet immediately or we don't meet. I just wanted to make sure that that is a good time. And if not, do we need to adjust? But if July 16th works, we can start that cadence in July. And then when we come to that July 16th meeting and we vote in the leadership, we will also have an anticipated meeting schedule that will be much like kind of mirror how this year went, right? We meet every other month and then you can vote on that meeting schedule and discuss if there's any changes that need to be made.
I think that works.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yeah, appreciate it. Yeah,
Great.
good stuff. All right. Any other business? Blake, I apologize. Thank you so much. Oh yeah, vouchers. If you have, if you request funding, make sure you submit. Sid's got the power book with the stickers in it. So thanks so much.
Hey, good to see you.